Thor, your bravery will not ease your pain. Your family, your world will be extinguished.
Thor, having restored balance to the 9 realms, returns to Earth to be with Jane Foster, his love interest from the first movie. Meanwhile, a dark elf named Malekith plans to use a weapon known as the Ether to shroud the universe in darkness. The good! Well, for one, the actors do a really good job in this movie. Chris Hemsworth is still a perfect Thor. He's both physically built and has a perfect natural voice to fit the bold demeanor of Thor's character. Tom Hiddleston steals the show as Loki. He sticks very easily to the basic aspects of what Loki is, but he's done so much to make the character his own that I think people are honestly more excited to see him in this movie than they are Thor. In addition, the chemistry between Loki and Thor is so good, I almost wish Loki was a good guy. Almost. He's just too good at being a bad guy for me to want him to truly switch. The comedy in this movie overall is really good. At times it's shaky, at times it's just okay, but it takes on a whole new life when Loki steps on screen. And speaking of comedy, the climax of this movie is one of the funniest I've ever seen. This is probably unintentional, so I probably should count this as a problem, but I was enjoying myself way too much to care. There are also 2 very funny cameos. One is from Stan Lee, like you would expect. The other, I won't give it away, but this is one of the funniest cameos I have seen in a Marvel movie. Probably my favorite thing about Thor cinematically is that whenever he's battling, everything feels so intense. Every strike Thor makes with his hammer shows his own strength and the sheer weight of the hammer that he possesses. And on the subject of the hammer, Mjolnir makes some pretty epic flights in this movie. There was an interesting role reversal between Thor and Odin in this movie. Whereas Thor was the bull-headed one and Odin was the voice of reason in the first film, in this film we see Odin taking on some bull-headed stubborn qualities and Thor being the man to stop and think about his actions, as well as the consequences to those around him. The iffy. There was some slightly confusing science that helped the climax. I almost want to cry Deus Ex Machina, but at the same time I gotta remind myself, this is the Marvel Universe. Crazy things can happen. Besides, if it weren't for that crazy science, we wouldn't have that unintentionally hilarious climax, and in the long run, I'm not complaining. There was a tender moment near the end of the movie that I wish had gone on a little longer. At the same time, I also have the feeling that where the film ultimately ended up may have contradicted with that. In any case, it wasn't that big of a deal. The bad. Christopher Eccleston plays Malekith. Stop it. Don't run to the comment boxes. I don't know this character very well, so I had to take it at face value for what was in the movie. And based on what I saw in the movie, he did a good job, and I was glad to see him in this movie. I just wanted to see his role expanded more, because let's face it, we didn't get enough of him on Doctor Who. 2 problems from the last movie carry over into this one. The first problem is, there's very little development for Thor's Asgardian friends. This is a problem because, like the last movie, Thor's friends do a big favor for him. Over the course of 2 movies, these characters haven't been very well developed, so we don't see the depth of their friendship with Thor and how they are so fiercely loyal to him. We're just expected to believe that they are. The second problem is Natalie Portman as Jane Foster. She does a good performance, and her actions do serve relevance to the plot in this movie. But she feels like a forced, uninteresting character who's just there to give Thor roots on Earth. We also see hints of romantic competition between Jane and Thor's childhood friend Sif. But barely 10 seconds in the film is dedicated. No dialogue is exchanged between the 2 characters. Just a little brief exchange between Odin and Thor, and then Jane and Sif share some eye contact. That's it. At the same time, I'm not sure they could have gone very far with a subplot like that because, as I said, there isn't very much development on the characters, so we don't really feel the depth of the relationship that Sif has with Thor. What I feel is another missed opportunity for the Thor movies is that Thor isn't having grand adventures in the 9 realms, or he is, but we don't get to see very much of them. Instead, the focus of this movie lies on Earth, and the reason for that? Probably Jane. For a film with the subtitle The Dark World, The Dark World doesn't lend itself to the movie in a very important way, aside from it being the location of the ether, and even then, the ether doesn't stay there for very long. As such, it becomes a location more for scenery as opposed to an actual important location. The verdict? Though my feelings are pretty mixed on a few things, I enjoyed this movie at the end of the day. The comedy was excellent, and I loved the on-screen presence of Thor and Loki, whether they're separate or together. This is Detective Steve, and this film was very comedic for something called The Dark World.